The following program is to provide entertainment and information. It is not considered to be any legal or investment advice. Good morning, appraisers. Let's talk some real estate. You're listening to the Voice of Appraisal, the #1 appraisal podcast in all of America that always brings you the latest news and information from the front lines of the real estate market. Anything from market conditions, appraisal regulations, cryptocurrencies, big bank news. Folks, you have a question, we have all of your answers. We are the one-stop source for all of your real estate appraisal information needs. If you want to be in the know, you have definitely tuned in to the right show. I'm your host, Phil Crawford. Happy to have all of you here with us today. Kevin, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Great to be back in the captain's chair.
The captain's chair.
Once again.
And we've got a big interview coming up. I reached out to a real estate appraiser in South Dakota by the name of Kassidy Peters. Now, Kassidy Peters is Governor Kristi Noem's daughter. Okay, so her mom is the governor of the state of South Dakota. Okay. And there's been some news stories about Cassidy and some drama that's been going on in South Dakota regarding her appraiser certification. Mm-hmm. So I was reading all the news stories, and then I saw the news story when Cassidy said that she was going to surrender her license this year. All right. And that's when I reached out to her because that got me very frustrated because I hate it. I can't stand it when an appraiser who wants to get into this arena, which is an extremely difficult arena to get into, right. I don't like it when they have to surrender their license or they make that decision to just surrender their license, especially after all of the hard work that they go through. So that was very important to me, and I wanted to just hear her side of the story. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our interview with residential real estate appraiser Kassidy Peters. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest on the Voice of Appraisal podcast. We have certified residential appraiser from the great state of South Dakota. We have Kassidy Peters on the line. Cassidy, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Phil. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here as well. Thanks a lot for being on the show. You know, I just wanted to reach out to you because I've heard a lot of things going on in South Dakota. You have kind of decided, because of all of the news stories that are out there, to surrender your real estate appraiser certification. Have you done that yet, Cassidy? Have you surrendered it yet?
I have not yet. That's my plan to. I have not yet, as I just finishing up all of my business end, year-end things, and then I'll get on to that.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we have a conversation before you decide to give that up? How about that?
That sounds good.
Does that sound good?
Let's do that.
So let's go ahead and start from the very beginning. So here's Kassidy Peters. You're living in South Dakota. You're from South Dakota. You grew up, obviously, in a rural area of the country. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. I grew up near Watertown, South Dakota. I grew up with horses on a ranch and not too far from a family farm. So Definitely rural South Dakota.
And you went to college?
I did, yes. I started off went 2 years at the University of Sioux Falls. My junior year, I transferred to South Dakota State University and took up agricultural business.
So after you're done with college, the big question everybody wants to know is when and why did you want to become a real estate appraiser?
So, actually, my senior year of college, I had no idea. If you would have asked me what an appraiser was, I wouldn't have had any clue. And my dad had a friend in Brookings that was a certified general appraiser. Okay. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after I graduated. And he said, well, why don't you go talk to him and maybe you can shadow him and kind of see what a day in the life of an appraiser is like. So I did that. I shadowed him for a couple days, and he did mainly ag land. And that's, what I was going to school for. So I said, this is it's ag related. Right. He has his own business, and this is kind of the path I want to go. So I, shortly after, actually, when I had done this, it was my last semester, the beginning of it. So right away I started taking my classes to become a state registered appraiser. And I graduated in May. And then when I graduated, I had already gotten all of the classes done. I just had taken those along with my last semester credits. and then I was able to take the test and transition into the state registered license.
So the state registered license in South Dakota would be something like a trainee's license in other states, right?
Exactly.
So you're a trainee, and you're not really signing the appraisal reports at this time. Someone else is taking responsibility for your work, but you're working alongside them.
Yep, that's exactly right. I was just working alongside them. I wasn't signing off on any reports at all at the time.
Well, that's typical. That's a typical path to take. And then he was a certified gen, right? So he's out there doing a lot of agricultural work. It's interesting because when you take a look at all of the appraisers in South Dakota, and you don't have a lot of them, you have like 450 some, right?
Right, not many at all.
No, some are retired, and some have put their license on the shelf for the moment. So really, there's actually like only 390 in the entire state. But most of those 390 are certified general appraisers, and I'm assuming the reason why so many generals are in South Dakota is because you've got a lot of ag, you got a lot of rural areas, and that license requirement will be needed to appraise that type of property.
Exactly. Yeah, we are mainly ag land and farms and dairies and all that in South Dakota. So most of them are certified general.
So you started out, first of all, you took all your classes to get your trainee's license. Every one of those classes require a test unto themselves, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you got to pass those exams. Now, then you had to take an exam. Now, this is very interesting with South Dakota. This is a little bit different than the rest of the jurisdictions. There are 50 states in the United States, but there are 55 jurisdictions when it comes to the appraisal profession, okay? So of the 55 jurisdictions, 5 of them require an examination before you even get into the field. You took that examination before you were even able to get out there and become a quote-unquote trainee or registered trainee in South Dakota. What was that examination like?
Gosh, I mean, when I look back on things that were challenging in my life, that pretty much almost tops the list because it was, honestly, that test is one that you should have experience in the field before you take that test. There's a lot of questions on there that no trainee would ever know unless you have been, working alongside an appraiser. It's definitely not something that the classes that you take beforehand teach you. And maybe 25% of that test is those, but the rest of it is not. So it was. I mean, I didn't pass it right away. I've never been someone that has troubles with that, but I eventually did pass it, and lots of studying and taking extra coursework on my own.
Now, hold on. I don't want to cut you off here. Listen, you didn't pass it the first time.
No, I didn't pass it the first time.
You're coming out of college. You still have the mindset that you can pass an exam. You're coming out of college. You've now taken all your classes, which you did pass. We're not talking about the one to get your certification, right? We're talking about the exam before you can even become a trainee, right?
Yeah, this is the exam that says you can't even work alongside an appraiser or even get into the field at all until you have taken this exam. So before this test, I had not gone on an inspection. I had not even looked at an appraisal report before. So this is right after I took my initial classes.
So this is a really easy state to get a license in, isn't it, Kevin? I mean, this is great, How many hours? How many hours was it?
The test?
Yeah.
It took me about 5-6 hours.
Yes, that's what
Oh, yeah, that's easy.
That's easy, without having any training whatsoever or anything like that. And then, let me guess, it probably covered topics like capitalization rates, discounted cash flows, things like that. Probably didn't learn that in all of your classes before. And unless you took business classes in college, business college classes are totally different than the real world when it comes to appraiser. This isn't an easy job. People think this thing's an easy job. It's not. All right, so you had to suffer through. You failed it the first time. I mean, most people at that time would say, "The heck with it. I'm going to go do something else." Right? You're coming out of college. You're like, "Okay, I've got a lot of options in front of me." But you actually went back, took additional classes, and then you passed it. Yes.
Yeah, I took it, and they weren't classes that anyone had, because I had reached out to multiple people and I asked for help. What can I study? What can I do to pass this test? And really didn't receive any feedback. So these were classes that I just went out, paid, took on my own, funded my own, just based off of what I thought was going to be on the test.
So none of the appraisers reached out to you, say, Cassidy, you might want to take this course, this thing like that?
No, I do, since a lot of the appraisers in the state never had to take this test. It hasn't been in South Dakota forever. So whether they didn't know what to expect either, or, I didn't receive any feedback.
Well, you make a very good point when you say none of the appraisers had to take this exam. Just to give you a brief history of the appraisal profession, remember, FIRE was passed in '89. So state licensing came in, and we had to take our exams around 1991, 92. You had until, I think it was 1992 to take your exam. That's when my dad took the exam. So my dad's a certified general appraiser, retired, okay? So he took his examination somewhere around the 1990, 1991 time period. Everybody did. Everybody in Cincinnati that was an appraiser went and took your examination because you were, up until that point in time, you carried a designation. You either carried a Appraisal Institute designation, IFA designation. Dad was an old IFA guy. So he goes in, he takes the exam, and he was given 6 hours to take it. All the residential guys walked out in 2 hours. Dad walks out of his certified general exam in 4. So the 1990s, it was a lot easier to become a certified residential appraiser, okay? Then you get into the double O's. Now, I started my experience log officially. I grew up in the industry, so I'd always been around appraising, but I officially started my log in 1999, became a licensed residential appraiser in 2000, walked out of that exam in 2 hours, waited to become a certified general. So I'm a certified general appraiser in Ohio. That was 2001. I had to do additional hours and additional time in the field, which was, I think at that time, somewhere around close to 3 years. I didn't take the certified general exam until 2007. And that examination, they gave you 8 hours, and it took me 7 hours and 50 minutes to take it. I mean, it was a seriously intense examination. And that's with me growing up in the industry and being in the field for all of those years. It sounds like to me the exam that they're giving is pretty intense in South Dakota. And at the same time, remember, a lot of the people that you talk to never had to go through the path that you had to go through.
Yeah, totally different experience. And I think that, a lot of them just didn't know how to, when I would go to someone for advice, they didn't know how to relate to it or didn't have any idea what was on it themselves.
I would say right now, there's a lot of appraisers out there today in the field that could not pass the modern day examination right now, especially with all of the, the cap questions, the discounted cash flow questions, all of those things. So let's move on a little bit. So here you are. You pass the exam, then you start your experience log. So tell me a little bit about the experience, the field experience that you went through, training to become an appraiser.
I started off, like I said earlier, doing the ag side of appraisal, and working with this appraiser and certified general in Brookings. I did that for about a year, and then I had kind of walked away from it for a while, just as was kind of confused as to where I was going to go, which path I was going to take. I wasn't loving the ag side of appraisal, and which made me, confused, because I thought that when I first started, that's what I was going to do. So I walked away from it for a while, and after a couple months, I thought I've put a year's work, and during this year, I was taking classes, for my certified general license, and so I thought I'd put all this work into it. I've never been someone who can give up on something they started, and so I decided to jump back into it. We had moved to Pierre. My husband and I had moved to Pierre, and there I found a certified residential supervisor. She did all residential and was absolutely wonderful, and that's who I finished my training with.
So when you were doing all this training, what kind of work were you doing? Was it secondary market work? Were you out there and, appraising for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those type of loans?
Yeah, it was, I would say 95% secondary market work. It was all working with banks. When I moved to Pierre and I started working in the residential, that was kind of new to me because I was doing all ag land. She was doing 90% of the secondary market, and so I really got a lot of experience with the banks and really just writing reports, doing inspections, all of that.
So it's a different world, isn't it? Because you're going from, a 65-page, 75-page narrative report on the agricultural side to the URAR, the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, and then you're throwing that report through, a UAD MISMO file. You're living in that world. You're being baptized by fire, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, totally different world.
It's a tough world, isn't it? It's not easy, is it?
It wasn't, and it was, especially coming from not having any experience, it was definitely overwhelming at first and a little intimidating.
Let me ask you another question. Your turnaround times on your agricultural work, 1 month, right? Your turnaround times on your residential
residential
work, 3 days, right? Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different experience, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And that's what I think that's partly what drew me to the residential. That's more my, I like to get that quicker turnaround time.
Oh, and I'm sure all of the banks and AMCs that you work for like your quicker turnaround time too.
I'm sure. I bet they did.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So you're baptized by fire. You're working in what is called the UAD, the 1004 world. So when you're in that world, did you ever receive, as an appraiser, after you turn the report in, any revision request from the client? Hey, listen, we need you to address this, or did you ever receive any reconsiderations of value?
Yeah, I did receive, like the small, okay, can you take a look at this? Can you expand on some information on this?
Sure.
There were a couple instances where they would send, can you look at these sales and see if they fit? So, if those are reconsiderations of value, then yes.
That's usually what every appraiser goes through, especially if they're doing secondary market work. It happens all the time. So you do this and you finish up your log, your experience log, and then you go to turn everything into the state so you can sit for your certified residential examination. Tell me about how that went.
Yeah, I got all of my hours and all of my classes done in the fall of 2019. So I submitted everything into the state. They asked for 3 reports.
Sure.
They asked, education, experience log, all that. I sent that in, hoping it would just take a couple months. And in the meantime, after I submitted that, I sat for the exam right away instead of waiting, to hear back. And I just sat and passed it my first time. Took a year, a little over a year to hear back from my review.
Hold on, wait a second. Okay, so when you turned everything into the state, then you went and took your exam. Now, this is the big one now. Okay, so this is not the one that you took when you became a trainee. This is the big one, right? And this one's tough. And you took the residential one, right?
Yes, I took the residential.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. I hear this from appraisers all the time. When you take the residential exam, how many commercial questions were on it?
How many, just from being a certified general experience?
Yes. How many questions on that exam don't just cover residential, but go and heavy into the commercial side as well?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but there was plenty. I was sitting on that test going, okay, I didn't realize this was going to be.
Yeah. All of a sudden, here come these questions, right? So usually how these exams are set up is that there's the residential questions to begin with. Then you get into the CAP questions. Then you take the USPAP questions, which is sort of like your halftime in this mental process. And then you get into if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while, but I think you got some serious CAP and some just kind of cash flow questions and operating income statement questions as well.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Lots of those. If I remember correctly, it was quite a bit of those.
So you walk out and you pass the exam, and then you wait. So while you're waiting, do you still work as an appraiser in South Dakota? I mean, you're still working with your supervisor?
Yeah, while I'm waiting, I'm still basically doing what I was doing as a trainee. I obviously was more experienced, so I was able to take on a little bit more of a workload and some more responsibility, but I was still working with my supervisor.
And this is in 2020?
Yes.
And the AMCs and the lenders are loving you because your turnaround time is freaking phenomenal, and we're in the middle of the biggest refinance boom in history since March 5th, 2020, data point 0, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
crazy.
so you're crazy, and you're not. So you probably haven't slept in 24 months. I haven't slept in 24 months. You probably haven't either. So
no, exactly.
Okay, so finally, you get a response back from the state. What'd they say?
I got a response back from the state saying that my reviewer came back with USPAP errors that needed to be fixed, and I could fix them. And I could set up a call with the reviewer. I could fix them and get them all sent back into the state.
Cool.
For a second review.
So did you do that?
I did. I sat down, I called my reviewer, and I sent him multiple emails to make sure that I was understanding where he was coming from and making sure that I was correcting these up to the standards.
And what happened?
I sent them back into state. I waited, waited a couple more months, received another statement saying that there were more USPAP issues that were separate from the ones that I had originally submitted.
They found additional USPAP problems?
Yes. I think there was a few in there that were not the same. They were the same ones as before, but they weren't corrected. But there were additional ones as well.
So they said that you didn't correct the original and then they found additional?
Yes.
After discussing this all with your reviewer,
Yeah, I mean, I went over every single error that was on my revisions and I made sure that I understood fully what these revisions meant and how I can fix them.
So, and this is from a person that has a bachelor's degree, took a test, a very difficult test to get started in as a trainee. Then you have 3.5 hours of field experience. Then you take another very, very difficult exam, and this reviewer is saying, by the way, you didn't correct them correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, and all the time you're waiting, right? All the time time's still going by, right?
Right. I mean, I thought I was going to be waiting a couple months, to get to the end of the process, so I can start my career and start my business. And here I am a year later.
How long have you been doing this now? What is this? 4 years into this? Is that what this is?
This was 4 years into it because I started in 2016 and this is 2020.
How long did it take to get your bachelor's degree?
4 years.
Okay, let's move forward a little bit.
Wow.
I know this is great, isn't it, Kevin? I want to move to South Dakota. All right, so here we go. Let's go on now. So they come back. You have additional errors on top of the other errors. So tell me what happens next.
So I have additional errors, and then I correct these, and then we have an agreement that I can go to Pennsylvania. There is an Appraisal Institute class there.
Okay.
It's a residential report writing class.
That's a 5-dayer.
Yep, full 8-hour days, not including, this is by far, and maybe even college courses, the hardest. It was a tough class. It's mainly because it's a lot of, anyone that's taken the class.
Yeah.
Knows that you are just writing constantly, and it's a lot of after hours.
So they come back, they give you the option at that time to go to Pennsylvania, to get on an airplane, at your expense, right?
Yep.
To get on an airplane, go to take the report writing class from the Appraisal Institute, 5 days, and you're constantly writing, then you have to take an exam, right?
Yes, at the end of the class, yep.
Okay. So you go, and you take the exam with report writing, then you go back to South Dakota. And tell me what happens next.
If I remember correctly, I resubmitted the reports. I had passed the course, and it was a 2-part because you had not only passed an exam, but the instructor also had to pass you on your report, and he had to correct each of these reports. And if they weren't up to par, then you didn't pass the class. So it was a 2-part examination, and so I came back to South Dakota, and after I had given notice that I had passed it, I received my certified residential in November of 2020.
All right. Well, there it is, right? All right. There you go. So she finally gets it, right? Did you have to receive anything else? Like, did you have to send them back another report or anything like that? Or no? Once you passed that examination, you were good to go?
Yeah, once I passed it, I was good to go.
Okay. You finally become a certified residential appraiser in South Dakota. Now, after you get your license, do you then start your own business? Is that what you did?
Yeah, I actually, before that I had started the business so that when I had gotten my certified residential, I could just jump right into it. So As soon as I was certified residential, I was in my own business already.
Already ready to go.
Yep.
So bottom line is it took you about 4 years to become a certified residential appraiser in South Dakota. Now, in most situations, people that have advanced degrees usually go maybe 6 years to college. Some people go to 8 years to college. You had finished college, and it took you an additional 4 years just to be a certified residential. I think there's something wrong in the great state of South Dakota, don't you? I mean, Kevin and I are dying. We're sitting here cracking up over this whole experience right now. This is absolutely unbelievable.
I was going to say real quick, Phil.
Yeah.
You always led me to believe that it's easy to become an appraiser.
Well, I always wanted to train you, but if we lived in South Dakota right now, Kevin, the hell with it. I'm not training you at all. I mean, you're going to cost me money for crying out loud. 4 years into it, I can't make a dime? This guy cost me money anyways. So obviously you have certain connections in your life that could look at this situation in South Dakota and say, hey, look, I think we need to have some changes made, right? And you probably found out really quick that a lot of South Dakota appraisers may not want those changes to take place.
Yeah, I learned quickly that when, certain people been doing what they've been doing for so long, they don't like it when someone comes up and wants to change things up and maybe make things better.
Or even be able to allow more competition in the state. For instance, let's talk about this just for a minute. We talked about before, there's only 400 and some appraisers in South Dakota. You know what happened in North Dakota, don't you? North Dakota went to the appraisal subcommittee, the ASC, in 2019 and asked for regulatory relief against appraisers, period. They wanted to have appraisal waivers through 2019 and 2020 because there wasn't enough appraisers in the state to cover the banking needs. Remember, they're messing up the banking system. They're messing up the realtor system. And the ASC had no choice but to grant them that because you can't shut down banking and you can't shut down real estate. So in this situation here, if you don't make changes in South Dakota rather rapidly, you're going to run in the same situation that North Dakota did. And if there's appraisal waivers in place, then who's going to get any orders anyways? That's the whole thing about it.
We're looking at the average age of an appraiser in South Dakota going, okay, eventually we're going to run out of time here. Something needs to be fixed because nobody's going into appraisal and people are eventually going to have people filtering out. So what are we going to do when we get to that point?
Well, that's a very good segue, Kassidy Peters. I've got the information from the Appraisal Institute in front of me about our demographics. Now, this is from 2019. It probably hasn't changed very much. If anything, it's gone down since 2019. But let's go ahead and look at the ages of appraisers. You want to?
I'd love to hear this.
Okay, here we go. Age of appraisers. Over the age of 66, 20% of appraisers right now. 20% are over the age of 66. Those are the appraisers that were probably licensed back in 1990, 1991, or they carried a designation before that. Now, ages 51 to 65. You ready for this? 50%.
Wow.
50% aged 51 to 65. If I were to look at when they got licensed, these were the 1990s kids, I guess is what you'd say, okay? An easier examination, by the way. Now, age 36 to 50, that's me, okay? Here's 36 to 50. 22%. These are the appraisers that got into it probably during the 00. So we've got 20% over the age of 66, 50% over the age of 51 to 65, 22% 36 to 50. Here we go. 26 years old to 35 years old, 5.8%.
Wow.
Under the age of 25, which you are almost there, right? I'm not going to ask your age, but I mean you're on that cusp, right?
Right.
1%.
Wow.
1%.
I did not know those statistics, and that kind of blows my mind.
70% of this profession is over the age of 51. Let me ask you this question. If you had a lot of professionals out there today that were firmly ensconced in their business, do you think they would want anybody else to get into it?
Yeah.
No. They don't want anybody else getting it. They don't want anybody else getting into this. You're from Watertown, right? You're from Watertown? That's where your business is, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You have 8 appraisers in Watertown. There are 8 appraisers in Watertown, South Dakota, USA. So if you give up your license, then there's only going to be 7 appraisers left in Watertown.
And not only that, I had left Pierre. I did most of my residential work in Pierre. And when I left, at the time when I was there, there's 4 appraisers, including me. When I left, I had multiple clients and banks reach out to me and say, I don't know what we're going to do. We have one appraiser that's part-time, one that's transitioning out, and we're going to get to the point here that they're panicking. They don't know what they're going to do. I covered a 150-mile radius around Pierre, and there's no one to go to these small towns. They sometimes have a 3-month turnaround time because you just cannot find an appraiser to go to these small towns.
3 months?
Yeah.
They're going to go down the same path as North Dakota. Appraisal waivers, that's what it is. They're going to go down that path. So it sounds like to me there's a lot of issues that are going on in South Dakota. I'm going to deal with the South Dakota Real Estate Appraisers Organization. What's the coalition up there called, Kevin? Give me the information on the coalition here real quick. It's called the Professional Appraisers Association of South Dakota. I've promoted the state coalitions throughout the country significantly since 2014 when this podcast began, but I've consistently warned the appraiser coalitions about possible antitrust issues. But I'm not going to go over that on today's show with you. I'm going to tackle that in a different show, okay? I'm going to have a little conversation with those guys. Let me ask you a question here really quick. Have you surrendered your license yet?
No, I have not.
Why did you want to? Because you were just frustrated, you just said to hell with it. I was going through all this stuff. I did all this work. This is just ridiculous. I'm done. I mean, you're a human being. Human beings are human beings. Is that what was going on here?
No, honestly, I if that were the case, I probably would have quit at the very beginning when I didn't pass my test. And honestly, the reason I had such just significant damage to my business, there especially being in Watertown.
Right.
There wasn't much repair I think I could do to it.
Were you put on so-called appraiser blacklists or something like that, where people just weren't using you?
Yeah.
Was it a reputational thing where people like, I don't know if she really knows what she's doing or not? Sort of that type of situation?
I don't know if it was that so much because, after the fact, I got a lot of support. I think it was more so like, hey, her name's kind of been all over. I just don't even know if I want to go there. I don't want to know if my, in the banking world, I don't know if I want my clients, someone that's coming in for a mortgage to see her name and question it.
Because they know you're the governor's daughter.
Correct.
At the same time, that actually makes you a very safe appraiser in South Dakota, because when I send an appraisal report to you, so say I'm an lender, I'm going to send you an appraisal report. See, you can't mess up. You are not allowed to mess up, period. And the reason why is because if you ever did, quote unquote, mess up on an appraisal report, every report you sign is a possible news story.
Exactly.
Kassidy Peters, the governor's daughter, forgot to put a half bath in the basement, and therefore, you can just see it right now. So really, honestly, if someone were to send you a report, your due diligence would be much, much greater because you'd have more scrutiny on you. You'd have a big microscope on you.
Yeah, and honestly, I felt that from the very beginning, that I had to be even more so just aware and not even making small mistakes, because I felt like more eyes were on me.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever reached out to any of the local attorneys? You've been through a lot. It sounds like to me you went through basically a colonoscopy review at the state, right? So you would do really well under cross-examination if somebody was cross-examining you during a court case. Have you reached out to any attorneys to maybe work with them, estates, things like that?
Yeah, I've definitely, and I did a little bit of that beforehand too. There's definitely some work there to be done, but yeah, I've definitely been in discussion a little bit with them.
I'm looking at your resume right now. You've got the college experience. You went through hell trying to get your trainee through that test. You had to do all of these years of experience in the field, which, by the way, is a baptism of fire doing this work in the secondary market realm, okay, with UAD and MISMO and all that stuff. I know people that became appraisers just doing, quote-unquote, administrative reviews as part of their work experience. Mm-hmm. You've done all of that. You've passed the big, huge exam, one of the most difficult professional exams out there. You know what's coming down the pike, right? You know that PREA is coming. The PREA stands for the Practical Applications of Real Estate Appraisal. This is coming out of the Appraisal Foundation. This is basically going to make it a heck of a lot easier for you to get field experience in the future. This is like metaverse appraisal. So you'll take your exam, you'll take your classes, and then you'll go to the virtual world. You'll virtually look at houses. You'll virtually meet homeowners. You'll virtually have to deal with dog poop in the backyard. That's the metaverse side that the industry is going to go to. So if I look at your path to becoming an appraiser, all 4.5 years of it, I think you deserve an opportunity to keep your certification and maybe not now, but see about starting a business in the future. I think you became an appraiser pretty much at the toughest time in history. And I will say this, being in this business as long as I have and knowing as many people as I know, I think you have done more to become a certified residential real estate appraiser than most of the appraisers in the field today.
I really appreciate that, Phil. It's definitely been when I look back on the past 4.5 years, just a tough experience, something that, getting into it, I never thought I would have to, challenges I never thought I would have to encounter. Right. And I just never have been someone that has given up. And so that's why I kept persisting forward. And so that's probably been the most heartbreaking thing of all of it is, when you put so much time and effort into something and even starting your own business, right, watching it, crumble. And I am inactive right now. I have not surrendered it yet, but I do appreciate your words.
The way that you're feeling when you got really upset and it got really demeaning and you felt like all that time and energy and effort and hard work, run that by an appraiser who goes up to a state board on a frivolous complaint after doing it for 15 years with young children to take care of in their life. And all of a sudden they get some, 30-day suspension, 60-day suspension. They go on a nationwide, blacklist through all the lending institutions. If you want to talk about heartbreaking, I've had grown men call me crying their eyeballs out because they have children that they need to take care of or somebody's in the hospital and they got a stupid complaint to the state. Let me ask you one other question. This is a really important question, too. Do people complain on appraisers in South Dakota?
They do, yeah.
So they complain on them, right?
Yeah.
So if the system's so damn good and it takes you 3 to 4 years to get the damn license, then why are there any complaints in the state of South Dakota? That's my point. The reports that are written out of that state should be so good that God himself could not come down to planet Earth and write a report as good as a South Dakotan, a real estate appraiser. That's my 2 cents on the matter. Now, you've got a next, so tell me what you're doing next in the meantime while you think about what's going on with your appraisal career.
Yeah, I've recently accepted a position with Call to Freedom. They're a nonprofit that help human trafficking victims, and they really, when I say help human trafficking victims, it's not just they house, they offer counseling, anything that they may need, and I'm the director of development with them, so I'm excited to be working with such a good nonprofit that has working towards a great goal.
So you are going from the real estate appraisal profession and going against pretty much the most evil, disgusting human beings on the face of the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't like boring jobs, do you?
I don't. I
okay.
I like to get right in the middle of it.
Well, that's good. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on. When it comes to appraisal, if you need anything, you've got our email here. If I don't have the answer, I'll find you somebody that does have the answer. And if you need anything, we'll be around, and I appreciate you coming on to the Voice of Appraisal podcast.
Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
And there goes Kassidy Peters, certified residential real estate appraiser in the great state of South Dakota. Watertown, South Dakota, USA, to be exact. Kevin, what do you think? You're a layperson.
Right.
What do you think? She should keep it or not?
I say, yeah, give it some time, see how it goes. I mean,
I have never heard of such a difficulty to become an appraiser in this country, except for West Virginia, because West Virginia, that board, that's got its own little separate upgrades board.
Okay.
Guess who sits on that upgrades board? All of your competitors. All of your competitors sit on the upgrades board, and guess how many upgrades they have?
0. Absolutely none.
I wonder why, and there's a bunch of certified generals on this special board. I wonder how that's going on. Kevin, why doesn't anybody else cover this? Why doesn't anybody else think about this stuff?
I was going to say, why isn't anybody else picking up on it?
Is there no leadership in this profession, Kevin? There is no leadership. It's absolutely crazy, Kevin. So next podcast, we're going to discuss Dr. Perry's book. I'm going to bring up some situations when it comes to appraiser racism. We're going to break that down as well. That'll be in about a month from now. You have any questions, you want to reach out to us, the email is info@voiceofappraisal.com, info@voiceofappraisal.com. If you guys need anything, just let us know. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our show for this month, and as always, I would like to thank you for listening. As we journey through the mysteries and complexities that are, in fact, the real estate appraisal profession, I would like to thank our guest, certified residential appraiser Kassidy Peters, from the great state of South Dakota, for being here for her thoughtful insight and knowledge. Kevin, thank you very much for being here. God willing, we're going to be back here very soon, continuing to report from the front lines of the real estate market. In the meantime, you kiss your spouse, you hug your children, enjoy your day, be safe in the field. You've been listening to Phil Crawford on Voice of Appraisal. We'll talk very soon.